You might have heard of Island of the Blue Dolphins, the story of a girl surviving alone on an island. But the real woman behind that story? Her life was darker than the book ever showed. She was left behind on a remote island. She survived there alone for 18 years. When she was finally rescued, people celebrated. She had beaten nature. 7 weeks later, she was dead, and with her, the last living voice of her people vanished. This is the real story behind the legend, the survival and tragic end of Juana Maria. A small schooner lies off San Nicolas Island, far off the coast of California. The last Nicolino are being rushed on board. Wind is rising. Waves slam the shore. People shout. Children cry. Sailors panic. In that chaos, something goes wrong. Some say a child went missing at the last second, and a woman jumped or ran back to shore to find them. Others say she was simply forgotten on the beach. We still don't know which story is true. We only know this. The captain, afraid of the storm and the reefs, ordered the sails up. The ship turned, and it left. No one jumped in after her. No one forced the captain to turn back. One decision, one moment, and her whole life changed. Imagine you are in her place. You stand on the sand and watch the only ship you've ever known grow smaller, and then vanish into the gray. You scream, but the wind tears your voice away. You sleep that night with a storm above you. The next morning, you wake up and realize something almost no human has ever faced. You are completely alone, on an island, with no idea that no one is ever coming back. This is where the real survival begins. San Nicolas Island is a small rock in the ocean, far off the California coast. No jungle, no river, almost no trees, just wind, sand, cliffs dropping straight into cold surf. Fresh water? Only a few tiny seeps and rain pools, if you know exactly where to look. For most people, this is a death sentence. But the ocean around it is rich. Thick kelp forests, seals and sea lions on the beaches, fish, abalone mussels, seabirds. For thousands of years, the Nicolino had turned this harsh place into home. They knew the sea, the winds, and the seasons better than anyone. Then almost all of them were taken away. All that knowledge now lived in one person. Everyone else was gone. Now the question was, what could she do with that knowledge alone? In the early 1800s, outsiders arrived. Spanish missionaries from the mainland, Russian, and Aleut-led hunters chasing sea otter fur. Hunting turned to conflict. On San Nicolas, a violent clash left many Nicolino dead. Disease and disruption did the rest. Their population crashed from hundreds to just a few dozen. Mexican authorities then decided to remove the survivors to the missions. They said it was for protection. In reality, it was control and cheap labor. One rushed evacuation, a storm, a captain in a hurry. And because of that, one woman's punishment was 18 years of total isolation. The ship is gone. The village stands empty. Cooking fires are cold. No voices. No one answers when you call. At first, she probably ran the old paths, searching for the missing child, calling their name, checking every hiding place she knew. But slowly, horribly, the truth set in. There was no one else on this island. In modern prisons, solitary confinement can destroy people in weeks. Hallucinations, crushing anxiety, depression. She had no counselor, no guard, no calendar on the wall, just sky, wind, and ocean. So, how did she not lose her mind? The answer is in what she built, and how she kept her culture alive with no audience at all. First problem, shelter. Almost no trees. No big wood for a house. So what do you use? Whales. Years later, archaeologists found the remains of a house framed with huge whale bones. Massive ribs and jawbone stuck upright like curved pillars. Gaps packed with brush and grass to block the wind. Imagine sleeping under a roof of bones in a house you built alone. For clothing, she had no cloth, no shops. She made garments from skins of seals and sea lions, and from bird skins and black cormorant feathers, sewn together with bone needles and thread from sinew or plant fibers. For tools, she used the technology of her people. Stone knives, bone awls, shellfish hooks, and barbed points. If a piece of metal drifted ashore from a wreck, She turned it into a cutting edge. Nothing went to waste. Food came mostly from the sea, fish from the kelp beds, abalone and mussels pried off rocks. From the land, she took birds and eggs, wild plants and roots the Nicolino had known for generations. But on a dry, windy rock, the biggest survival question is always water. She couldn't dig a river, so she learned to collect every drop, catching rain in rock basins and containers, finding hidden springs and tiny seeps, rationing carefully through dry spells. Her campsites don't look like the work of someone in blind panic. They look like someone who adapted, planned, improved her tools over time. She wasn't just trying to last a week. She was quietly designing a life that could survive years of isolation. But the hardest part of survival was still to come. Hunting, fixing, gathering. These things fill the day. The deeper fight is against silence. No one to laugh at your jokes. No one to remind you who you are. How do you keep your language alive if you're the only speaker? The men who later met her said she often sang. Her speech was musical, flowing, and completely unknown to them. Alone on that island, she seems to have talked to herself, told stories out loud to no one, sung the songs of the Nicolino into empty air. Her calendar wasn't dates on paper. It was seasons, birds nesting, seals puppying, plants blooming and dying back. The seasons were her clock. For 18 years, every word she spoke belonged to a language no one else on earth understood. When she died, that language died with her. While she lived alone, people on the mainland knew, at least vaguely, that someone was still out there. Sailors and hunters reported smoke on San Nicolas, footprints on empty beaches, hints of a camp. Missionaries mentioned the woman left on the island. People talked about sending a ship. Year after year, no one did. Too far, too risky, too easy to ignore an indigenous life. The island stayed empty, except for one person. Almost 20 years after she was left behind, that silence finally broke. In the early 1850s, a Santa Barbara otter hunter named George Nidiver heard the old rumors again. A lone woman, smoke on an empty island. He organized a voyage. On the first try, his men saw signs of someone, worn paths, footprints, but no person. On a later expedition in 1853, they tried again. This time, they found a small camp, brush and whalebone structures, baskets, tools, stored food, but the camp was empty. Imagine walking into that space. Everything placed with care, freshly used tools, and yet no owner. Where was she? They set up their own camp and waited. Days passed. Then, one afternoon, a figure appeared on a distant ridge. She walked toward them, closer, closer. She was smiling. She wore a skirt made of black cormorant feathers, layered like roof tiles. In her hands, she carried roasted seabird eggs and roots. Her first instinct, after 18 years alone, was to offer the strangers food. The hunters tried Spanish. They tried local native languages. Nothing matched the sound she made, so they used what was left. Gestures, smiles, shared meals. She laughed often, pointed toward the island as she mimed storms and canoes, trying to explain her life. And somehow, across a total language barrier, they convinced her to leave. After 18 years, she climbed into a boat again. She had no way to know that the real danger wasn't the island she was leaving. It was the world she was sailing toward. Santa Barbara must have felt like another planet. Streets instead of sand. Church towers instead of cliffs. Crowds of staring faces instead of empty horizon. For almost 2 decades, she had spoken to no one. Now, dozens of people tried talking to her at once. Locals treated her like a curiosity, the wild woman from the island. She was housed in George Nidiver's home, given heavy European dresses instead of her feather skirt, surrounded by unfamiliar smells, noises, and rules. Priests from the mission came to see her. They decided she should be baptized. They gave her a Spanish Christian name, Juana Maria. That's the only name of hers that was ever written down. Her real Nicolino name, what her family called her, is lost forever. Educated men sat in the same room with the last speaker of an entire language, and almost no one bothered to write her words down. As she tried new foods and breathed town air, something else was happening. Something she couldn't see. Something far deadlier than any storm on San Nicolas. Her body had adapted to 18 years of clean sea air, hard physical work, simple, protein-heavy food. Now, in just days and weeks, everything changed. New foods loaded with sugar and fat. Crowded houses filled with foreign germs, bacteria, and viruses her immune system had never met. She fell sick. Most historians think it was some kind of intestinal infection, dysentery, combined with diet shock. Her body couldn't fight it. Remember the numbers. 18 years alone on a barren island. About 7 weeks in town. On October 19th, 1853, roughly 7 weeks after leaving San Nicolas, she died. The woman who had beaten isolation, storms, and hunger for nearly 2 decades could not survive civilization for 2 months. She was buried in an unmarked grave in the Santa Barbara Mission Cemetery. Church records describe her only as the Indian woman brought from the island of San Nicolas, baptized Juana Maria. No mention that she was the last of her people. No mention that an entire language went into the ground with her. Some of her baskets, tools, and clothing were sent to museums. Over time, many were lost or destroyed. Her famous cormorant feather skirt may have been shipped to Europe and vanished. For decades, her story was a footnote. Then, in 1960, the novel Island of the Blue Dolphins turned a fictional version of her into a children's heroine. Later, archaeologists went back to San Nicolas. They found whalebone house remains, tools and food middens that matched a single person living alone. Physical proof that she wasn't just barely hanging on. She was adapting, planning, enduring. Only recently have people begun to talk about her not just as the lone woman, but as a survivor of violence, removal, and neglect. Juana Maria's story isn't a Hollywood survival fantasy. No dramatic escape raft. No big final showdown with nature. Her heroism was quieter and harder, getting up every day in an empty village, fixing a roof when no one is there to hold the other end of the beam, gathering food you'll eat alone, singing songs in a language you know will die with you. For 18 years, she chose not to walk into the sea, not to lie down and give up, just to keep living. Even when the world had forgotten her, her life is both a testament to how far human resilience can go, and a quiet accusation against the systems that made that resilience necessary. The fur trade, the mission system, the decision to sail away and never come back. They all combined to leave one woman stranded with the ghosts of her people. If this true story of Juana Maria, the lone woman of San Nicolas, 18 years alone and dead just weeks after rescue, moved you or made you think differently about isolation, survival, and history, please like this video. It really helps this story reach more people. And if you want more real survival stories, from empty oceans and frozen peaks to deserts, jungles, caves, and lost islands, subscribe to the channel. There are many more stories of endurance, erasure, and quiet courage still to come.